Welcome to the Mormon to Medium podcast, where we'll talk about spirituality, the paranormal, religion, and my journey going from Mormon to medium. I'm Nanette Ride. Thanks for listening. Now let's go have some fun.
Don't be afraid. Close your eyes.
Welcome to the Mormon to Medium podcast. Today we have a special guest, and we are super excited to introduce her to you. I'm Sandy Whitaker.
Hello,
Sandy.
everybody. Hey.
So Sandy is a really good friend of ours, and she has a really interesting story of the things that she's been through. You know, all of us have different journeys that we're going through, and it's all a journey back to self, right? Well, Sandy's dug through some pretty deep holes in her life, and she's also left the church. She's gonna tell us about her journey. So go ahead, Sandy.
Well, I don't know where you want us to start. So I was born and raised in the LDS church. My parents, my brothers are very, very active. The Mormons. They're very, very active. My mother still serves weekly in the temple. My brothers also serve. Their families have been very active. So my entire life, I was raised in the church. My first marriage, I got married in the temple. Now we had, kind of been naughty the way, kids are when we were 19 and were unable to go through the temple first. So when we had my daughter 2 years later, we went to the temple. We were all sealed. And, of course, now I'm thinking everything is going to be roses and dandy because we did all the things. But I don't know exactly how we did not get along. I was very codependent. I kept thinking I could fix everything. I could, all I had to do was be better. If I were kinder, if I were smarter, if I were thinner, if I were prettier, if I were shorter, and no matter what I tried, I felt like I was never good enough. And
Joe, it seems like a lot of women have that, right? Like where they're like, oh my God, I can take this guy and I can fix him. He has these flaws, but I'm going to fix him.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't think that he really needed to be fixed in the way that I felt that he should be fixed. And so he resented that, of course, because nobody wants to be fixed when they don't feel like there's anything wrong. But long story short, our marriage lasted for 16 years and 4 children. And at the end, when we got divorced, it was weird. I didn't marry well, but I divorced worse. So my divorces have been ugly as far as people think, oh, in Utah, moms get it all. And no, that's not true, which is fine. And he felt that he needed to, get what he wanted, and he fought hard for it. And all I wanted was my children, which I did get. So, that all worked out. After our divorce, I was angry and bitter. And at one point, my bishop called me in and said, I've had this.
Wait, isn't that happens though, right? I mean, a lot of times people get divorced. They're not all these amicable, oh, we're still best friends. We're great co-parents. Sometimes things get ugly, and it sounds like yours got a little bit ugly. So
yeah.
And I can see why you would be a little bitter.
Yeah. And my marriage was not great. I mean, there was, I didn't know about it at the time. I didn't accept it or understand it at the time, but there was some domestic violence involved. And when I learned about, what was happening, and I didn't realize, you can say no to certain things, and you can, I don't know. I had to learn how to set boundaries. I went to therapy for 3 years, and my therapist taught me how to set boundaries. And when I got those boundaries set and then the boundaries got crossed, then I finally felt the bravery, the whatever, to say, okay, we're done. I don't need to live like this anymore. And so I left and had him leave the home, and the kids and I stayed. But my bishop called me in and was like, you're very, very bitter. And so God has told me that because you're bitter, I need to take away your recommend. And I remember thinking, but that's the one place that I feel safe, is to go to the temple. My parents worked there. I'd learned that was your haven, that was your safety net. And all of a sudden I'm being told that because I'm bitter, I can't go.
So just to clarify, when you talk recommend, you're talking about for the LDS temple, right?
Correct.
Just
right. So
anyone
you
out
have
there who isn't, yeah.
Right, right. So I was like, oh, well, gee, maybe I need to be better. I mean, I need to be a better person because if God said I can't come see him, then, maybe I am a terrible person. But at the same time, my ex-husband went and found a different bishop. And the bishop that he talked to was like, dude, yeah, you need to go to the temple and go and be. And my parents were having to see him at the temple, but yet I'm not allowed in because I'm angry and bitter. Why am I angry and bitter? Because, well, he can get in, I can't. Anyway, I think that was the beginning of
Wow.
things. It took me a couple of years and I met another man and I was very active still. And we dated right. We read our scriptures together. He taught my children Isaiah. We went to the temple once a week on a temple date. There was no hanky panky before our marriage. We were so on track. I did it by the book, the way the book says. And I prayed about it. I called his bishop. I called his stake president. I met them. They told me what a nice guy he was. And he was, we were just going to have the best life. My friends all liked him. My family liked him. Everybody liked him.
Now, what
And
you mean by the book
the Book of
is
Mormon and the Bible
the
and
Mormon book,
the
right?
Mormon book. And because
Yeah.
it tells you how to live your life. And it says, if you do these things, you're going to have a happy life. And so I literally followed the plan. I went to church. He came with me. We paid our tithing. We served in callings. We did all the things like, we wore our garments. We did everything that we were supposed to do according to the LDS church. And so I was thinking, this is it. The reason I had this unhappy marriage, but God's going to now bless me and I'm going to have this wonderful marriage with this wonderful man. And he loves my kids. And look at what he's doing for my kids. He's taking my kids shopping. He's doing all these wonderful things. He's spending all this time with my kids and buying them things. And
Hmm.
I was like, wow, this
Well,
is what I put up with crap for.
Sandy, can I back you up
Yeah.
for just a second? So there's some time that took place in between, right? So from where the last bishop said, hey, Sandy, you're a
Yes.
bitter, angry woman. You can't
Yeah.
go to the temple, to you going, yeah, I found this new dude.
True.
And
So for a year,
oh, temple
yeah.
date.
So for a year, I didn't have a recommend. And then my bishop, and I just kept working. I kept, he had me read the worst book of all time, The Miracle of Forgiveness, and
Miracle of Forgiveness. I was going to say that. Oh,
worst book of all time.
Would that
and-
be this book?
That's the one. And it left me
such a
feeling
loving book.
broken. It left me feeling so broken that it was my fault that my first marriage had failed. And so I worked so hard and did all the things and I, did all the, callings and all the jobs. And my bishop called me back and he's like, Sandy, it's time. You can have your recommend back. And this is so great. And I'm like, finally. So I guess, yeah. So I started going to the temple and then that's kind of how and where I met my second husband. And I was like, there we go. I'm back on track. God has forgiven me. I'm worthy again to be in his presence. So I must be doing things right. So I married this man and I thought, okay, we're golden. We are so golden. And, we built a house and we moved my kids from Cache Valley to Davis County. And I thought, oh, my life is going to be 100%. And had a plan that we were going to go to the temple together and be sealed. But before I could do that, I had to have my first marriage. Basically, it's a divorce in the temple, like a temple divorce. And I had to have that taken away. And so there's a bunch of paperwork. And so I started doing all the paperwork. I wrote my letter. I wrote my letter to my bishop. I wrote my letter to my first husband. I did all the paperwork and I handed the paperwork packet to my new husband. And he just didn't ever want to work on the paperwork. And I thought, well, it's hard. And I kept making excuses. And so he never did his portion of the paperwork. And at the time, the church only allowed you to have a temple divorce as a woman if you were going to be getting married in the temple again to someone else. You can't just, I think it's different now, but at the time it was, you can't, like, you're sealed. We're going to keep that sealing. You're stuck there no matter how you feel about that person. But that, so.
Yeah, that's your eternal companion, whether you like it or not.
Exactly. And so, I mean, and that was difficult for me because there was just, I didn't want that. And I didn't want that person. And so I kept thinking, I've got to just hurry and get this paperwork done. Well, my second husband and I were only married for over 4 years. And during that last year, he kind of started to fall away from the church. He wasn't as active. And I thought, well, he's going through a crisis. We have all these kids in the house. He is not used to kids in the house. His life has been uprooted and changed, and things just started to kind of slowly disintegrate. And my youngest started to have some behavioral issues, difficulties. And she came to me one night, and I had the worst cold, and I took it. It was my birthday, actually. And I took some NyQuil to get to sleep because I was so sick. And I don't do well with NyQuil. It knocked me out. And my daughter came to me and she told me that my husband had touched her inappropriately.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, what? What did you just say? What? And I remember thinking, I don't think I heard you right. And she couldn't get me to wake up enough to hear her. And so I told her, I says, I'll come sleep with you in your bed tonight and we'll talk about it in the morning. And in the morning, she was just like, you know what? I guess it was just a bad dream. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And so I was
Oh.
like, you know what? I had a shitty night. Like, I don't. And then I had to put it aside because I thought it's the NyQuil talking. Like, it has to be the NyQuil. And that was in February. And
Well, because
then,
that's something that no one wants to believe about their spouse.
No. And I asked my husband and he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I was out in the garage with my son. Like, what is she talking about? And I'm like, okay, Sandy, like you were up in the night. Like you must have dreamt, you had bad dreams, right? She had a dream, got mixed up with you. Like, and to this day, I hate taking NyQuil. I hate being unable to clearly hear and think because bad stuff happens when you can't clearly think. And so that was in February. And for the next 10 months, he slowly groomed her and molested her more and more and more until Christmas time. And anyway, it all came out right after Christmas. And I was like, I asked him, I said, well, did what happen? What she told me happened back in February, was that real? And he said, yeah, that was real. And I said, well, how many times did that happen? And he's like, only twice, only twice. And I'm like, well, twice is too many. Like, this can't, I have to leave. And so I just said, I'm just going to scoop up my kids and leave. So to shorten the story, because it is very long, I had called my bishop to help me move out. And he's like, what's going on? You guys are a great couple. You're a great family. What's going on? I said, that's between him and his heavenly father. Like, that's not my business. And the bishop was like, okay, but I really want to know. So he called me into his house and he had his counselor there. And so I told them everything. So then they called him in and apparently he also told them. And the one thing the bishop did right was he did call the police. So
wow.
I was too afraid.
That's actually, that's a big switch from what typically happens when somebody goes to a bishop. Usually it's, hey, we've got to call Curtin McConkie and get legal advice before they ever involve
he actually reported it. And then he helped me get out of the house. And then, he got him out of the house so that I could have time to gather my kids and my things and get out. So he was very helpful at that first moment. And then when the police got involved and we went to the CJC, the Children's Justice Center, and we had our interviews there, we found out that it had happened way more than the 2 times.
Yeah.
And it had been going on for the full 10 months. And I was unaware and felt like a dirtbag because how do you miss that? How do you miss your child, your 10-year-old child, being harmed and allowing that to happen under your own roof? And I missed it. And so when we got out and then it took us 2 years to get him into court. And
you for just a minute.
Yeah.
Sandy, don't beat yourself up on that.
It's taken me a long time, but I don't. I no longer own his evil. It took me a really long time and a lot more therapy to realize that his evil choices, he pulled the wool over my eyes. I didn't turn a blind eye, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is, when you found out about it, you addressed it and you
Yes.
started to take care of it. So, and
Yeah.
that's a lot different than what happens in a lot of situations. So, Sandy, you
And-
did what you had to do to protect your child.
And the
CJC
CJC people,
commendable.
yeah, the CJC people told me that there's only 15% of women will report a spouse. And of that 15%, only 5% will take that to court. And of that 5%, only 1% will succeed in court. So the odds were super against us. And to tell you the truth, if I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't. It was hard. It was painful. I lost family. I lost friends. And I felt like I lost my God. And so I felt very thrown to the wayside because, they always say, well, things happen for a reason. No, it doesn't. That happened for no reason. That there's no reason for that. Like, you can't tell me everything happens for a reason. Nope, I don't believe that. That was
I have
just
a question
evil.
now.
Yeah.
Could he have been doing this before, long before he got to your daughter, and this was the ending point? This was the universe saying, you're done. And you just matched up with the right lady that's going to put you in your place.
I believe so. I mean, there's nobody else that said or come forward. I did talk to one of his previous wives for a very short time, and she was surprised that it was a girl instead of a boy. She said that she had seen some things that would lead her to believe that he would molest a boy. There was some computer issues, some different things that she was aware of. And I don't have the details on that, so I don't want to get into that. But she did say that she was so sorry that had happened to me. She didn't feel safe enough to come forward. Having seen his angry side, I can see why. Like, to this day, he's been in prison now for, I want to say it's 13 years. To this day, I don't feel safe with the idea of him being outside of those prison walls.
Big win for your family, though, and for everyone that's been a victim, because guaranteed she's not the first.
Well, and
he was good at it.
And it's like I told her, I said, even if we don't win, we can protect his grandchildren and his nieces and things, other people, another woman and her children. If nothing else, maybe, we could stop that from happening to anyone else, because it's
Sandy,
horrible.
It's completely normal to feel that fear and go, oh my God,
he's
what's
scary
here?
Well, he threatened. He told us we would die if we told. But I was like, I can't not go forward. And back to my spiritual journey during this time, like I said, I was so impressed that the bishop had actually called the police. But then after, I felt like they wanted to wash their hands of me as well as him. Now, I don't know.
The bishop or the police?
The police. The police were great. The bishop, I just felt like I didn't have a place anymore. Like, suddenly I didn't fit in their mold anymore. And so I thought, well, they didn't want me teaching in primary. They didn't want me teaching in young women's. And those were the places that I'd always served before and always felt comfortable. And all of a sudden that was taken back.
Oh, you're a single woman now. You can't have a single lady do anything.
Exactly. And that's that kind of got that. And then I don't know what punishment or when, I don't know anything about his churchness, but again, I got to the point where I didn't get my recommend back. And I thought, really? Again? You're taking my recommend away again?
Because you were bitter again? What? I don't
because
understand.
I had turned my back on my family and that there's a question that says, is your relationship with your family in good standing? And apparently turning your husband into the police and getting a divorce is not treating him well. So I wasn't a good mom. I wasn't a good wife.
Wow.
And so they said, no, you can't go back to the temple again. And so I said, okay. And I tried really hard and I worked really hard for the next 8 years. Well, 6 years. Because when my daughter turned 18, I finally said, okay, look, I have worked my butt off. I have tried everything. I mean, I can't have the missionaries over into my house for dinner because I'm a single lady. And how dare they, send some poor two young men into my house. So I could buy them pizza, and give it to them, but I can't have them in my house for dinner, even though my children I felt that they could have benefited from the priesthood in my home. But because I didn't have the priesthood in my home, I was not welcome to invite them into my home. If there were sister missionaries, I could have those over, but in Davis County, there wasn't a lot of options there. So there was just a lot of that tension where I was like, where do I fit in? Where do I fit in? And for the next 6 years, as I'd go to church, I would come away feeling so angry. I had friends who would say, like I had a son who ran away from home. I have this daughter who has all these problems. I had a truck run through my house and run over my kid. Like all these things.
What? Whoa. You can't just gloss over that.
Well,
That's
there I
a story
was.
you gotta
There I
hear.
was. So one day I had bought a home for my children finally on my own. It had taken me a long time to get my feet underneath me. I lost a lot of money in that second divorce. He had taken out some different loans that I wasn't aware of that were against the equity in our home. And so when we finally sold the house after a year, I got a check for $500. And I'm like, no, I had $80,000 that I put in, like my money. Like I sold my previous house. And they're like, yeah, but it's gone. There's nothing left. And of course. So my credit was shot and I had no money and had to start over, which I'm like, fine. I have my kids and they're safe and I don't care. Like moving on. So it took me a couple of extra years and I found some beautiful friends who work in the real estate and mortgage company. Shout out to Janelle and Tulane. And they helped me buy a house. And so I had this beautiful home and my youngest and I had looked for houses and she was like, I don't want to leave school. I don't want to leave my friends. But we found a house. She actually found it. She talked to the bishop and he said, hey, well, you should go talk to this family. I think they're going to put their house up for sale. And I'll be dinged. They were going to put their house up for sale and he sold it to me for my price. Like it was like, again, I thought, oh, wait, God's not so mad at me. He's given me this home. We're okay. And then I had literally barely unpacked and my neighbor was high on spice and ran his truck into the edge of my house and my daughter was in the basement and he came all the way into the house. Like his truck plowed all the way in and his rear axles got hung up on the rebar and that's what stopped his forward motion.
Wow.
And so the truck was literally on top of her. So it tipped her down and the truck landed on top of her. And my son was coming into the room at that moment and this cloud of dust. And he was like, what just happened? And then anyway, so he yells up to me, Mom, call 911. And I'm like, what? My first thought, he had just come home from the military from boot camp. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, my son has blown up my house. What has he done? And so I come downstairs and there's this car, which actually was a truck. There was this car in my house. And so I'm calling 911 and I'm like, there's a car in my house. I don't think it's supposed to be here. And totally not okay with what had just happened and had a little bit of anxiety. The police came, they got my daughter out. My son helped her get out of the house. And all I could say was, there's this, effing car in my house. There's this effing car in my house. And finally, one of my friends who's a police officer kind of grabbed my face and he goes, Sandy, it's not a car. It's a truck. And it kind of shocked me back into reality. And I'm like, alrighty then. So anyway, so we got through that. And, so my daughter's now had this, horrible thing happen. Now she has a head injury. And my beautiful home that God gave me is been destroyed. And then again, I'm starting to feel like, okay, what have I done? Like, why does God hate me? Like, he seems to be punishing me. And I never could find anyone to make me feel not being punished. And so I'd go to church and I'd come home angry because, if you pray, if you pay your tithing, if you serve in your callings, the Lord is going to bless you. And I'm thinking, well, if this is the way the Lord blesses me, I'm good. I don't need any more blessings, this is enough, and so I was like, okay, well, maybe let's just hold off on the blessings. I don't want them anymore. But every Sunday it would take me a week that, usually it's a week for that wonderful calm feeling to kind of wear off and you need another refill in your bucket. Mine was the opposite. I would go to church and I would come away so angry and so hateful. And they, because every time somebody would talk, it was, did you say your prayers? Well, God will bless you if you say your prayers. And I'm like, I have been on my knees until I am bleeding on my knees. I have read the scriptures until my until my
You
eyes are
did not
blue.
go there.
And I'm just like, he did go there, which was
Did you
good.
hear?
Perfect timing.
Did I say that out loud?
Yes.
No, I didn't hear anything. So I stopped going to church because it was making my life harder. I did have a really good bishop at that time. He was a very kind man. He was going through cancer, his own cancer journey, and even sick. He came and, shoveled my walks. And
Wow.
the bishop before him, however, wasn't as great. And he was telling my son, he's like, well, if you're tattooed and you drink and you smoke and whatever, then, you're a bad person. And my son would argue with him and say, well, my older brother is all those things and he is the best man you'll ever know. And the bishop's like, no, that can't be. You can't be tattooed and drink and smoke and do drugs and be a good person. And my son was like, yeah, you can. Like, have you met my brother? He's really cool. He's like the best. And he was talking about, well, if you were a good person, you get a job, you're going to have a 6-figure income. And he said, well, my mom, she's a good person and she has a job and she can barely make ends meet. And basically, he made my son feel like his mother wasn't trying hard enough. And so my son was like, screw that. Like, I'm not listening to somebody who's going to tell me that my mom isn't a good person because she's a good person. And I had to thank him for that, for standing up for me.
Yeah.
So that bishop and I, we didn't get along great because when I would ask for help, he would say, well, you could have help if you serve 8 hours a week at the bishop's storehouse. And that includes you and your daughter and your son, the 3 of you at home. I'm like, that's 24 hours of service in a week. Like, if I had 24 hours extra in a week, I'd get a second job. I'm
Right.
like, I'm home alone. I have 2 kids. They've got activities and whatever. Like, I just need a little help sometimes with a few bills or some food. Like, I can do most of it, but I can't do it all. And he refused to let me get help unless I did all this extra stuff. And I didn't want a handout, just a hand up,
Yeah.
just to
Right.
get on top. And he was like, yeah, that's not how it works. You have to do the service. Well, luckily, like I said, he got released. This new guy gets put in. And I felt bad because, like I said, he was going through his own cancer journey. But he said to me, look, on those days that you can't make your gas payment, I want you to just bring it to me. Just hand it to me and I'll just pay it. No questions asked. So every once in a while, and it didn't happen often, but there was some months that I couldn't quite make it. And I would just quietly hand him my electric bill or my gas bill. And I just knew that it was going to get paid. And then I could still get my groceries. And if I couldn't make my tithing, he didn't berate me and make me feel like a horrible human because I wasn't giving God all my money. And then, like, does that make sense?
You'll hear, it makes perfect sense, Sandy, and you'll hear the term Bishop Roulette a lot, right?
Yeah.
And this is like a classic example of it. You had some men who were so kind and so understanding and so connected to the Spirit of God, right?
Right.
And others who just, obviously they were not. It's very much a situation of Bishop Roulette as far as who you had and what they did and how they reacted.
Exactly. And so, and I kept trying to not blame the church as a whole for the individual actions of these people, but it was getting harder and harder. And then, like I said, all the people in the ward would, my life is so perfect because I said my prayers. And, I was reading the scriptures the other day and I got this, and I'm like, I was reading the scriptures and I got a headache. Like, where's my blessing for doing what I'm supposed to do, And so finally I just said, you know what, I just need to step back. And the bishop was great. And he said, you can step back. And the Relief Society president had a little harder time with it because she kept giving me people to go visiting teaching. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. And she's like, well, we need you to go see these sisters. They need to learn from you. And I'm like, well, I haven't been to church for a while. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Then she gave me a companion that was also inactive. And I'm like, you don't like these people very much, do you? Because nobody's coming to visit them. And she's like, no, you'll do it because you like them. And finally one day she came to me with another list and yet another list. And I said, what part of I can't do this? It's not that I won't, I can't. And I said, I don't think you want me telling anyone how I'm feeling about the church right now. Like, I don't think that's the point of visiting teaching because I don't have good things to say right now. So perhaps I'm not your best choice. And so finally, I was very aggressive and said, not happening. And she finally let me stop being a visiting teacher on her roles. And my daughter graduated from high school, and that was the last time that I willingly participated in church. I didn't know quite how to remove my garments, because I'd been wearing them for so many years and I didn't know how to let that part of my, becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
It
And
was.
so
Well, it's hard, right? You're like, wait, I've been wearing these for a really long time.
yeah, and
You're
I
like,
didn't know any better.
How do I go to Walmart and buy different underwear?
It's true. And so I started to kind of panic about it. And then I was really worried about disappointing my mother and my best friend because they're very, very active. And my best friend actually came to visit. And I sat her down and I said, I need to tell you, I don't want to wear these anymore. It bothers me that I'm wearing them. I'd really like to not, but I don't want to disappoint you. And her words were, I'm surprised it took you so long.
Oh,
And she was so
what a good
supportive.
friend.
Oh, she's the best. She was so supportive. And she helped me, take care of them in the way that I felt like, because I still have that connection where, there's these, I don't know the right words, the traditional way of taking care of used garments.
Yeah, you're gonna cut the nipple marks off.
Yeah,
and
so
the belly mark
she took
and
care of
yeah.
all of the traditional things for me, so I didn't have to. And then, I went and I bought some cute undies, right? And then when I finally talked to my mom, but I had to tell her, my best friend first, she's kind of my other part. She's my other half. She's my soul. And she accepted me and she still loved me. And she knew. And she said, she says, it hurts my heart that leaving the church is what's made you so happy. But I see that you are happy for the first time in the 30 years we've been friends, truly happy. And she says, it's sad that leaving the church is what is making you happy, but she didn't care because I'm happy. Does that make sense? And so
Absolutely.
she was loving and supportive. And so then I had the courage to talk to my mom. And again, shouldn't have had fear. My mom loves me regardless. My mom is, she's in my corner. Every once in a while, my mom and I'll butt heads, but I'm her daughter. And, and then telling my dad was another story because I was so afraid because, I'm daddy's little girl. And he also was very supportive and very loving to the very day that he passed away. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there, but
it's
anyway,
okay. Dads always have a special place for their little girls. Always.
Yeah. And so it was great to know that my parents still loved and supported me. And so I was able to just step away and just go, I'm better not going. And because it was making me so crazy, it was making me angry. And so I've kind of just got to the point now where I'm so happy. So after all of those uglies, and then I was a single mom for, from 2009 until 2015. And in 2015, a friend of mine had to teach a rappelling class in St. George. And he's like, I don't want to drive by myself. Please just ride with me. And I'm like, dude, I don't dangle from ropes.